Now, a podcast in the past has typically been not text-based, but audio-based. And that has really exploded. Podcasting has really exploded with the advent of the iPod, and the MP3 players have really, really made that popular. Now, from my understanding, there's kind of a misnomer out there. They think that a podcast was actually originated by Apple. And my understanding is that podcasts were around before Apple came out with the iPod player. And so podcasts are not a product of Apple. They take advantage of it, and they've really put it on the map. But podcasting has been around for a while. And but if you typically think of a podcast, that's going to be downloading audio. Now, that's not true anymore as well. Podcasts are now moving more into the video realm, and so you can download either audio or video from a podcast. And there are, a multitude of players that you can use for playing back podcasts. Of course, the probably the most popular is the iPod player for music. Now, typically with Apple, and they're the big dog in this, they're the ones where you can sign up for these, and so they have a directory. And so there are, rather than signing up for these on your website, I think most of the podcasts are actually signed up off of podcast directories. And the biggest the biggest podcast directory is going to be obviously iTunes. And there are literally thousands and thousands of podcasts available on iTunes. And virtually anyone can submit their podcast to Apple to be listed in the iTunes directory. And now, typically, you can see up here the categories that you've got. You've got audio and you've got video. And as more and more technology gets out there and the capability for video increases, the demand for video podcasts is going to increase dramatically, in my opinion. There are some other podcast directories as well, but all of these are available, and you can submit to those as long as you follow their guidelines, and there are procedures and software available for you to submit your podcasts into their directories, and you can be accepted into those, and so people can actually find you in those directories. So that's basically those, and there are places you can go to find those directories. Obviously, Apple is the largest podcast directory out there available. Okay, I want to give you today 5 keys to a successful podcast or a successful RSS feed. Okay, the first success tip is that content is king, and we come back to this in a number of our different presentations. And content is king is that statement is almost as old as the Internet itself, and it's still as true today as it was when the Internet first started. People are looking for information. We've moved into the information age, and people want information. People are looking for information. And if you can provide them with good content, good relevant information, that's what they're looking for, and you can build a following. The whole objective behind podcasts and RSS feeds and really a lot of the other things that we do in Internet marketing are to build a following, get people to be wanting our content, wanting our information. And so we've got to develop that content, and then through the Internet we can share that with people. So remember that podcasts and RSS feeds, these things are all about content, information, good content. That's the king of marketing with these things. Okay, let's look at success tip number 2, which is tightly related to that. That content needs to be what your viewers want. Okay, and I love this illustration because you've got to put yourself in the position of a fish. What is it the fish wants? If you're using things for bait that the fish isn't hungry for, you're not going to catch any fish. So if you're going to get people to follow you, you've got to provide information that they're interested in. So put yourself in the eyes of the people you want to follow you, and then provide them with the information that they are interested in, and then they will follow you. So always, always, always build your content with the end user in mind. Make sure that you've got something that's interesting, that they want, that's going to pull people to you. Just like that little piece of bait there on the end of that line is going to attract that fish. So remember this illustration. That's important. And it's, you know, you can provide content, but if it's content that no one's interested in, you're not going to build a following. If it's good content that there are a lot of people interested in, you can pull people in, and they will follow you, and they will subscribe, and then anything you put out, they automatically get. And boy, that's the great thing about this that you can do, is you give it to them, and they automatically pick it up. Okay, but we've got to be careful. Let's look at success tip number 3. Go easy on the advertising. Remember that these people don't want to be advertised to. We are tired of having stuff pushed on us, okay? So with these things, you can insert advertising in there, you know, and people are pretty interested in that, but be careful and don't make it one big, huge advertisement, or don't put too much advertising in there. Give them content. They understand that, you know, that there's got to be some motivation for you to give them this content, and so people are accepting of advertising in there as long as you don't overdo it. So, and sometimes you can work things into it, you know, kind of quietly if you're talking about, you know, how to use something, or you can recommend your product and those kinds of things. But go easy on the in-your-face advertising, because remember, just as easy as they can subscribe to your podcast or your RSS feed, they can unsubscribe as well. So, you know, work it in there, but be careful and kind of watch and be cognizant of not going over the line and having too much advertising or being in people's space too much. Okay, the 4th tip, and I think this is actually with podcasting and RSS feeds, this is actually the hardest thing to do. At least it is for me, and I don't know why, but I struggle with this one. Success tip number 4 is to publish regular episodes. Okay, decide what you're going to do. If you say you're going to have a weekly episode and you're going to add a new piece of content to this once a week, then do it once a week. You know, say what you're going to do and then do what you're going to do what you said. But publish on a regular basis. This is, like I said, probably the most important thing that you can do with podcasting or RSS feeds. Be consistent, and that's hard to do. But you know, pick a day and then always do it on that. Always do it on that day. And I know it's tough because it's tough for me to do, but that's critically important. Okay, the next success tip, I think, the last one was the hardest, and I think that this one is the most important. Okay, if you're going to do a podcast or an RSS feed, have fun with it. You know, don't make it a drudge thing. Develop a podcast or something that's going to be fun and that you're going to enjoy doing. Because if you enjoy doing it, it'll make it a lot easier to do it on a regular basis. And, you know, my heck, why do it if it's not fun? Make it fun. Make it fun for you to produce it. Make it fun for the people that listen to it. Just have a good time with it and enjoy yourself. And that's the best time, or the best thing to do. I've heard a lot of people, you know, talk about, well, what kind of business do I go into? Well, do something that you love. Do something that you enjoy. Do something that's fun. You might as well have some fun in life. So I think that this is the last one was the hardest. Step number 4 was the hardest, and I think tip number 5 is probably the most important, is to have fun with it. People will be able to tell if you're enjoying doing your podcast, or if it's just a drudge and you just got to get through the dang thing because you said you were going to, and oh my gosh. So have some fun with it. Okay, now let's talk about just how do you create a podcast or an RSS feed. And I guess the short answer to that is I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of it, But to get into that kind of meat, you need to go into more detail, and I'll give you some places that you can go to do that. But we can't really cover that in today's webinar. But let me just kind of give you just an over-the-top view of what you've got to do to create a podcast or an RSS feed. Okay, there are basically 3 steps that you have to go through to put up a podcast or an RSS feed. Okay. The first thing that you have to do is you have to create the content. And, you've got to decide what that's going to be, if it's going to be a video, if it's going to be an audio, if it's going to be text or whatever. You've got to decide, and you've got to create that content on a consistent basis like we talked about. Good, relevant information that you're going to give to people, okay? And so you can create that content any number of different ways or any number of different types of content, but the first step is to create it. Okay, once you've got it created, and that doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to be, a long, horrible thing to do. Create the content, then you need to upload it to a website, a hosting. It needs to be available. You need to make it available on the internet. And that's not too tough either. You just upload it. Depending on whether it's a video, it may take, a few minutes for it to upload. An audio, text goes real fast, but you just need to upload the content to wherever you're going to store it. Not too difficult, okay? Then the third step is that you need to update, or the first time you need to create, and I'm not sure exactly what the term for it is. I call it a control file, just to kind of cover all of them, okay? Now, what that control file is it's basically either a data file or a program. It depends on where you're putting this. Okay, that control file is what tells the players, hey, here's the content. I got a new one. Come download it. Here's where it is. And so basically every time you add a new piece of content, you're going to put that into the control file. Okay. Now what happens, let's take an RSS feed, for example, on your website. Okay. The file for an RSS feed is kind of a file, an XML file, okay? And it contains the information about, here are the episodes, here are the names, here's where they're located, and all that kind of stuff. And what happens is that when somebody subscribes with their player, every time they go into that player, or whatever they've set it, it comes back and it hits your website and it asks for that control file. And it says, oh, have you got a new episode yet? Have you got a new episode yet? And once you put that new episode, it goes, oh, yeah, hey, you got a new episode. Goes out, grabs it, downloads it to that device, and then at the person's leisure, they now have it with them. If it's on their iPhone or whatever, they've got it in their pocket. Whenever, they don't have something to do, they're sitting in the doctor's office waiting and waiting and waiting, they can pop that up and listen to it. And that just all happens automatically, but it's based on that control file. Now, if you want to go in and edit an XML file by hand, you can do that. I prefer not to, just because I'm, I guess, naturally lazy, or I don't know, I like to do things the easy way. But there are a number of different programs out there available, many for free, that you can download to your computer and will allow you to create or update these control files. So you don't have to be, a genius, know how to program XML or control any of these control file languages or data or anything. You just use the program, it outputs the file, and you just upload the file to your hosting right along with the rest of your stuff. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. And there are a number of those different kinds of control file editors that you can use. And it depends on, like I said, whether it's an RSS feed, whether it's a podcast, or if you're uploading something to iTunes, they require things in a certain format, and so there's software that will allow you to do that, and you just have to go out and find that. I'll give you a resource to find that here in a second, okay? But that's basically the 3 steps, and it's really doesn't have to be too difficult to do. Create the content, upload it, update your control file.